My name is Benjamin Harlow, and until 6 months ago, I was a structural engineer with the Baltimore Department of Public Works. I had a normal life, a downtown apartment, a girlfriend named Elise, weekend hikes in Patapsco Valley State Park, and the occasional beer with colleagues. I was ordinary in every way imaginable. But what happened beneath the Francis Scott Key Bridge changed everything, and I'm still not sure if I'll ever be the same again. I'm writing this account because I need someone, anyone, to understand what I experienced. The police reports documented a series of animal attacks. The newspapers called it a case of urban wildlife encroachment. But I know the truth, and it's far more horrifying than anything they've printed. It began on a Tuesday in late October. My department had received reports of unusual structural damage to the underside of several bridges spanning the Patapsco River. As one of the engineers responsible for infrastructure integrity, I was assigned to investigate. The damage didn't match any patterns we'd seen before. Not normal erosion, not vandalism, not even the damage patterns left by the usual urban wildlife. "You should check out the Key Bridge first," my supervisor told me that morning. "Whatever's happening there seems to be the most severe." I arrived at the site just as dusk was settling over the harbor. The fading sunlight cast long shadows across the water, and the rusted metal supports of the bridge loomed overhead like skeletal fingers. A cool autumn breeze carried the scent of salt water and industrial waste. I parked my truck near the maintenance access point and gathered my equipment: flashlight, camera, measuring tools, and documentation supplies. The maintenance walkway beneath the bridge was narrow and dimly lit. My footsteps echoed against metal and concrete as I made my way deeper beneath the structure. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness ahead, a steady rhythm that seemed to match my heartbeat. I switched on my high-powered flashlight and began examining the support beams. What I found didn't make sense. Deep gouges marked the metal supports, not the kind made by tools or machinery, but something else. They looked like claw marks, but impossibly large and deep. Some had penetrated nearly an inch into solid steel. Whatever made these marks would need tremendous strength, far beyond any animal I knew could inhabit the area. As I leaned in to photograph one particularly deep set of marks, I heard something splash in the water below. I swept my flashlight across the surface, but saw only ripples spreading outward. Probably just a fish, I told myself. I continued my inspection, moving deeper beneath the bridge where sunlight couldn't reach. The temperature seemed to drop with each step. My breath formed small clouds in the beam of my flashlight. That's when I heard it, a low rumbling sound that wasn't the traffic overhead or the water below. It was a growl, deep and guttural, echoing within the enclosed space. I froze, my flashlight beam trembling slightly as I aimed it ahead. "Hello?" I called out, immediately regretting breaking the silence. "Maintenance department. Is someone there?" No response, just the distant sound of cars passing overhead and water lapping against the concrete pillars. I took a deep breath and continued forward. Maybe it was just the wind, I told myself, or machinery somewhere nearby. I reached a junction where maintenance platforms converged, creating a small open area beneath the bridge's central span. My flashlight beam caught something unusual on the ground. Dark stains on the concrete, leading toward a maintenance door that should have been locked. The door stood ajar, its heavy padlock broken, hanging uselessly from the latch. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding. The stains on the ground looked disturbingly like dried blood. Professional curiosity overcame my growing unease. I pushed the door open with my foot and aimed my flashlight inside. The beam illuminated a small maintenance room, filled with tools and equipment, and something else. In the corner lay the remains of what I initially thought was a pile of discarded clothing. It took several seconds for my mind to process what I was actually seeing. The torn uniform of a maintenance worker, surrounded by dark, dried stains, and scattered among the fabric, unmistakable human remains. I stumbled backward, bile rising in my throat. My hand fumbled for my phone, but before I could dial 911, I heard it again. That deep, rumbling growl, much closer now. It came from directly behind me. I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. For a split second, I caught sight of something impossible. A massive shape, hunched and muscular, with gleaming eyes reflecting the light like a nocturnal animal. It was roughly humanoid but moved on all fours, its limbs too long, its back hunched at an unnatural angle. Matted, dark fur covered its body, but worst of all was its face, a nightmarish blend of human and wolf features with an elongated jaw filled with yellowed, razor-sharp teeth. The creature snarled, a sound that vibrated through my chest, and lunged forward with impossible speed. I reacted on pure instinct, throwing myself sideways as claws raked the air where I had been standing. I scrambled to my feet and ran, abandoning my equipment as I sprinted along the maintenance walkway toward the exit. Behind me, I heard the creature's claws scraping against metal as it pursued. Its movements were jerky but incredibly fast, like something caught between human and animal motion. I didn't look back, focusing only on the distant light that marked the access point to solid ground. My lungs burned as I ran. The walkway swayed slightly beneath my pounding feet. The creature's growls grew louder, closer. I could feel its hot breath on the back of my neck. I reached the ladder leading up to the access point and scrambled upward, my hands slipping on the metal rungs. As I pulled myself through the hatch, I felt something grab my ankle. Not a hand, but something like a paw, with fingers too long and claws that pierced my work boot and sank into flesh. I kicked wildly, my foot connecting with something solid. The grip loosened, and I pulled myself up onto solid ground, slamming the heavy metal hatch shut behind me. Something massive slammed against it from below, the impact reverberating through the concrete. I scrambled away as the hatch bulged upward with each impact, the metal groaning under tremendous force. Somehow I made it to my truck. My hands shook so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. As the engine roared to life, I saw movement at the access point, the hatch flying open, and something dark emerging. I didn't wait to see more. I floored the accelerator, tires screaming against pavement as I fled. I drove straight to the police station, my mind racing with the impossibility of what I'd seen. By the time I arrived, my ankle was throbbing, blood soaking through my sock. The desk sergeant took one look at my ashen face and blood-soaked boot and called for medical assistance. I told them everything: the claw marks, the maintenance room, the dead worker, the creature. They listened patiently, exchanging glances as my story became more frantic. When I finished, the detective assigned to take my statement cleared his throat. "Mr. Harlow, we appreciate you reporting this," he said carefully. "We'll certainly investigate the maintenance room. As for this creature, perhaps it was a large dog, or even a wolf that somehow made its way into the city." "It wasn't a dog," I insisted. "It wasn't a wolf. It was, something else. It stood on two legs. It had hands, almost human hands, but with claws." The detective nodded, but I could see the skepticism in his eyes. "You've had a traumatic experience. Sometimes our minds can play tricks on us in those situations." They sent officers to the bridge while paramedics treated the puncture wounds on my ankle. When the officers returned, they confirmed finding the maintenance room and evidence of violence, but no body, just bloodstains and torn clothing, and no sign of any creature. "Probably a homeless person was attacked by an animal," the detective concluded. "We'll increase patrols in the area." They released me after taking my statement, suggesting I take a few days off work. I nodded numbly, knowing they didn't believe me, knowing I wouldn't believe myself if our positions were reversed. Back at my apartment, I showered for nearly an hour, trying to wash away the memory of what I'd seen. I bandaged my ankle and poured myself a strong drink. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that face, that impossible fusion of human and wolf. Those teeth, those eyes. The next morning, I called in sick. My supervisor was understanding. The police had already contacted him about the incident at the bridge. I spent the day researching animal attacks in the Baltimore area, finding nothing that matched what I'd experienced. On a whim, I expanded my search to include folklore and mythology. That's when I first encountered the term that would come to dominate my life: werewolf. I'd always dismissed werewolves as fictional creatures, inventions of Hollywood and horror novels. But as I delved deeper into the lore, the descriptions matched with disturbing accuracy what I had seen. A creature caught between human and wolf, powerful beyond reason, hunting at night. but it couldn't be real. It simply couldn't. That night I heard scratching at my apartment window. I lived on the fourth floor. When I cautiously peeked through the blinds, there was nothing there, but claw marks scored the outside of the glass. I moved to a hotel the next day. For the next week, I tried to convince myself I was experiencing some sort of breakdown. I spoke to a therapist who suggested I was suffering from acute stress disorder. She prescribed anti-anxiety medication that I dutifully took, hoping it would clear my mind of the impossible images. But then the killings began. First, a jogger found mauled near the harbor. Then a homeless man beneath the Orland Street Bridge. A security guard at a waterfront warehouse. All attacked at night, all with similar wounds. Massive trauma consistent with animal attacks. The police issued warnings about a potentially rabid animal in the area. Animal control set traps. The local news ran stories about urban coyotes. I knew better. 2 weeks after my encounter, I returned to work, still limping slightly from my injured ankle. My colleagues were sympathetic but distant. Rumors had spread. I was the guy who claimed to have seen some monster under the Key Bridge. Some thought I was seeking attention. Others believed I'd had some sort of mental break. My supervisor assigned me to desk duty, reviewing plans and documentation rather than field inspections. I didn't argue. The thought of going back beneath any bridge filled me with paralyzing terror. But as the attacks continued, I couldn't stay silent. I gathered my research, documented the pattern of killings, and tried again with the police. The same detective listened with thinning patience. "Mr. Harlow, we understand you experienced something traumatic, but we need to focus on realistic possibility," he said. "We have wildlife experts tracking what is likely a coyote or possibly a wolf that's made its territory near the waterfront." "Wolves don't climb to fourth-story windows," I countered, telling him about the claw marks on my apartment glass. He sighed. "Have you been continuing with your therapy?" I left the station knowing I was on my own. That night I returned to the Key Bridge, armed with a high-powered spotlight and a hunting knife. Inadequate protection, I knew, but I needed evidence. I needed to prove I wasn't crazy. The autumn night was cold and clear, a half moon providing just enough light to navigate the access path to the maintenance walkway. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but I forced myself forward, my hand clutching the knife so tightly my knuckles turned white. The maintenance walkway was exactly as I remembered it. Dark, narrow, the sound of water lapping below. I moved cautiously, my spotlight sweeping back and forth across the metal pathway and concrete supports. The beam caught the reflection of eyes several times, but they belonged to rats and feral cats that scattered at my approach. I reached the junction where I'd encountered the creature before. The maintenance room door had been replaced, a new padlock securing it firmly. I turned my attention to the area where I'd seen the creature, examining the concrete and metal for evidence. There, on one of the support beams, I found what I was looking for. Claw marks, fresh ones, deeply gouged into the metal. I photographed them carefully, measuring the spacing with a small ruler I'd brought. 5 marks, each nearly an inch deep in solid steel, spaced like fingers on a massive hand. As I documented the evidence, a sound froze me in place, the soft padding of something moving across the walkway. I turned slowly, my spotlight beam searching the darkness. At first I saw nothing, then movement caught my eye, a dark shape sliding behind a concrete pillar. I held my breath, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure it could be heard across the harbor. "I know you're there," I called out, my voice echoing in the enclosed space. "I've seen you before." Silence answered me. Then from a different direction came that familiar growl. Low, rumbling, vibrating through the metal beneath my feet. I swung the spotlight toward the sound. For a split second, the beam illuminated those same reflecting eyes, now at the far end of the walkway. The creature snarled, momentarily blinded by the light, and I caught a clearer glimpse of it. It stood nearly 7 feet tall, its body a twisted amalgamation of human and wolf anatomy. Powerful muscles rippled beneath dark, matted fur. Its hands, I can only call them hands, hung at its sides, human in structure but tipped with curved claws that gleamed in the light. Its face was a nightmare, elongated into a muzzle filled with yellowed teeth, yet with disturbingly human eyes that held something impossible: intelligence. The creature recovered from the light's glare and charged. I turned and ran, abandoning any pretense of bravery. The walkway shook with the impact of its pursuit. My spotlight beam bounced wildly, casting frantic shadows as I fled. I reached a maintenance ladder and began to climb, the creature's growls growing louder behind me. Halfway up, I felt the ladder shudder as something massive grabbed it below. Metal screamed as the entire structure began to tear away from the wall. I jumped, catching the edge of the platform above as the ladder collapsed beneath me. Hanging by my fingertips, I pulled myself up with desperate strength. Below, the creature howled in frustration, the sound echoing across the water. I scrambled to my feet and continued running, navigating the upper walkway that followed the bridge's undersupport. The creature followed, now forced to move more cautiously on the narrower path. I had gained perhaps 30 seconds of lead time, not enough to escape, but enough to think. Ahead, the walkway split, one path leading toward the shore, another deeper into the bridge structure. I took the ladder, hoping to lose the creature in the maze of support beams and maintenance platforms. The path led to a small control room built into the bridge's central support. I slipped inside, closing the heavy door behind me and throwing the deadbolt. Almost immediately, something slammed against the outside, the metal door denting inward with the impact. I backed away, searching frantically for another exit. The room was small, filled with electrical panels and monitoring equipment. A narrow window overlooked the harbor, and another door led further into the bridge structure. The pounding on the door continued, each impact stronger than the last. The metal hinges began to bend. I had minutes, perhaps seconds. I tried the other door, locked from the other side. The window was too small to climb through. I was trapped. As the creature continued its assault on the door, I grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall, the only potential weapon in sight. The door buckled further, a clawed hand appearing through a tear in the metal. In desperation, I examined the electrical panels, finding the main breaker for the section. Without thinking through the consequences, I threw it, plunging the area into darkness. My spotlight, still clutched in my left hand, provided the only illumination. The pounding stopped. I held my breath, listening intently. Silence, then the soft scrape of claws on metal as the creature moved. Not toward the door, but away across the walkway. I waited, hardly daring to breathe. Minutes passed. Eventually, I gathered enough courage to approach the damaged door, peering through the tear in the metal. The walkway outside was empty. I waited longer, nearly an hour, before finally daring to leave the control room. The creature was gone, but it had left its mark. Claw gouges in metal, tufts of dark fur caught on torn edges, and something else. Blood, not human, but not entirely animal either, smeared on the railing where I'd struck out with my knife during the pursuit. I collected samples of the fur and blood, carefully storing them in plastic bags I'd brought for evidence. Then I made my way back to solid ground as quickly as possible. The next day, I used my connections at the university, where I'd studied engineering, to gain access to their biology lab. An old classmate, now a research assistant, agreed to analyze the samples unofficially. "What exactly am I looking for here?" she asked as she prepared the samples for testing. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "Something unusual, something that might explain what this creature is." She gave me an odd look but proceeded with basic tests. 2 days later, she called me, her voice strained. "Benjamin, what did these samples come from?" "Can you tell me what you found first?" I countered. "The DNA is—" "I've never seen anything like it," she said. "It has canine markers consistent with wolf DNA, but there are human sequences integrated throughout. It's like someone created a hybrid, but that's not possible with current technology. And the blood sample shows abnormal cellular structures and elevated levels of adrenaline and testosterone. Off the charts, actually." My mouth went dry. "What does that mean?" "It means whatever this came from shouldn't exist," she said. "Benjamin, where did you get these samples?" I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. "It's better if you don't know." "I have to report this," she said. "This could be some kind of illegal genetic experiment. If someone is creating hybrid organisms—" "Give me 24 hours, I pleaded. "Then do what you need to do." She agreed reluctantly. I spent those 24 hours compiling everything I had learned. The attack patterns, the bridge locations, the DNA results, my own photographs and measurements. If the authorities wouldn't believe me, perhaps I could find someone who would. I found an online forum dedicated to cryptozoology and unexplained phenomena. Most of it was obvious hoaxes and conspiracy theories, but I posted my evidence anyway, careful to anonymize any identifying details. To my surprise, I received a response within hours. The user, calling themselves Night Hunter, sent me a private message. What you've encountered is real. I've been tracking similar incidents along the eastern seaboard for the past 2 years. We should talk. Meet me at Fort Armistead Park tomorrow at sunset. Come alone. It could have been a trap. It probably was. But I was desperate for answers, for validation that I wasn't losing my mind. I agreed to the meeting. Fort Armistead Park was largely abandoned, its old military fortifications crumbling into the harbor. I arrived as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the overgrown grounds. I waited near the central ruins, jumping at every sound. Benjamin Harlow? I spun around to find a woman standing behind me. She was in her 50s with steel gray hair and the weathered face of someone who spent a lot of time outdoors. She wore practical hiking clothes and carried a backpack that clinked with unseen metal objects. I'm Margaret Wilcox, she said, offering a hand. Online, I go by Night Hunter. You know about the creature, I said, shaking her hand. It wasn't a question. She nodded, her expression grim. I've been tracking it since it appeared in Norfolk last year. Before that, it was in Raleigh. It moves north, staying in each urban area for a few months, hunting before moving on. What is it? I asked, the question that had consumed me for weeks. In folklore terms, a werewolf, she said matter-of-factly, but not the Hollywood version where people transform under the full moon. This is something else, a genetic anomaly perhaps, or the result of experimentation. It maintains its form permanently, as far as I can tell, though it seems more active at night. Why doesn't anyone believe it exists? I asked. There have been killings, evidence. Because people rationalize what they can't accept, she interrupted. They'll blame wild dogs, coyotes, even human killers before they'll believe in something that challenges their understanding of reality. She opened her backpack, removing a folder thick with documents. I've documented over 30 killings I believe are connected to this creature, across 3 states. The pattern is always the same. It establishes a territory near water, often using bridges or drainage systems as dens. It hunts at night, primarily targeting isolated individuals. And it's intelligent. It disposes of remains, avoids cameras, and learns from encounters. Like our encounter at the Key Bridge, I said. It adapted when I used the spotlight. She nodded. It learns, and that makes it infinitely more dangerous than any natural predator. How do we stop it? I asked. Margaret's expression darkened. I've tried. Conventional weapons barely slow it down. Its healing abilities are remarkable. I managed to hit it with a shotgun in Norfolk, and it was hunting again 2 nights later. There has to be a way, I insisted. Silver, she said. At least that's what folklore suggests. I've been trying to track it back to its origin point, to understand what created it. That might provide answers. As darkness fell around us, Margaret shared everything she knew, her encounters with the creature, her research into similar incidents throughout history, her theories about its nature. Some of it sounded like madness, but after what I'd seen, I was beyond dismissing anything. Our conversation was interrupted by the sound of a twig snapping nearby. Margaret went silent, her hand moving to her waistband, where I glimpsed a concealed handgun. We should go, she whispered. It might be nothing, but I don't take chances after dark. We agreed to meet again the following day and share more information. Margaret gave me her phone number in a small leather pouch. Silver nitrate, she explained. Dissolve it in water and load it in a spray bottle. It might buy you time if you encounter the creature again. I returned to my hotel room, my mind racing with everything Margaret had told me. For the first time since my encounter, I felt less alone, less crazy. Someone else had seen the creature. Someone else believed. That night, I researched everything I could find about werewolf lore, separating the Hollywood fiction from the consistent elements in folklore. Silver appeared repeatedly as a weakness, along with fire and decapitation. Not particularly helpful unless I planned to carry a sword and flamethrower. I was about to turn in when my phone rang. Margaret's number. "It's here," she said without preamble, her voice tense. "At the harbor near the National Aquarium. There's been an attack." I grabbed my jacket and the silver nitrate solution I'd already prepared. "I'm on my way." "Benjamin, be careful," she warned. "Observe only. Don't engage. I'm still 20 minutes out." The inner harbor was unusually quiet when I arrived. Police tape cordoned off an area near the water's edge, red and blue lights reflecting off the harbor's surface. 2 patrol cars and an ambulance were parked nearby, officers keeping curious onlookers at bay. I approached cautiously, staying in the shadows, straining to hear conversations. From what I could gather, a security guard had been attacked while making rounds. Survived but badly injured. Described his attacker as a large animal, possibly a bear. Movement caught my eye, something dark slipping beneath the pier on the far side of the harbor. I hesitated, remembering Margaret's warning. But if the creature was here, we needed to track it. I skirted around the police activity, making my way toward the pier. The wooden structure creaked beneath my feet as I moved cautiously forward. Water lapped against the pylons below. The space beneath the pier was dark, the water a black mirror reflecting distant city lights. I heard splashing, then the sound of something heavy pulling itself from the water onto one of the lower platforms beneath the pier. Dropping to my hands and knees, I peered between the wooden slats. Below, illuminated by a single security light at the pier's end, the creature shook water from its fur. It moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, halfway between lupin and human. In its clawed hand, it clutched something that dripped dark liquid into the water, part of the security guard's uniform, torn away during the attack. The creature seemed to be smelling the fabric, its elongated muzzle quivering as it took in the scent. Then it raised its head and looked directly up, at me. Our eyes met through the slats of the pier. Those eyes, human eyes in an inhuman face, widened in recognition. It remembered me. I scrambled backward as the creature let out a roar and began climbing the pylons toward the pier's surface. Wood splintered as massive claws dug into the structure for purchase. I ran, the pier shaking beneath my feet as the creature pursued from below. I could hear wood breaking as it tore through the pier to reach me. Ahead was the solid concrete of the promenade, perhaps 50 yards away. I wasn't going to make it. The creature was too fast, the distance too great. As I ran, I fumbled with the spray bottle of silver nitrate solution. It was a desperate measure, likely useless, but my only option. The pier collapsed behind me as the creature burst through the wooden planks. I risked a glance back to see it fully for the first time, standing upright in the glow of harbor lights. It was taller than I remembered, its hunched posture still putting it well over 6 feet. Matted dark fur covered a body that was a nightmarish blend of human and wolf anatomy. Muscles rippled beneath that fur as it tensed to spring. Its face was the worst part. A wolf's muzzle filled with yellowed teeth, yet with a forehead and eyes that were disturbingly human, filled with cunning and hatred. It leapt toward me with supernatural speed. I spun and sprayed the silver nitrate solution directly at its face. The effect was immediate and shocking. The creature recoiled mid-leap, crashing to the pier with a howl of pain. Steam rose from where the solution had contacted its fur and skin. It thrashed on the wooden planks, clawing at its face as though trying to extinguish a fire. I didn't wait to see more. I ran for solid ground, not stopping until I reached the promenade. Behind me, the creature's howls had stopped. When I finally dared to look back, the broken pier was empty. Margaret arrived 10 minutes later, armed with what looked like a modified rifle. "You engaged it," she said, noting my breathless state and the spray bottle clutched in my hand. "It recognized me," I explained. "The silver nitrate worked. It caused pain. Drove it off." She nodded grimly. "It confirms my theory at least, but it won't kill it, just discourage it. And now it knows we're actively hunting it. That makes it more dangerous." We searched the area carefully, finding blood on the broken pier, the same unusual blood I'd collected before. The creature had fled into the harbor, likely retreating to another location to recover. "It needs to end," I said as we stood at the water's edge. "More people will die if we don't stop it." Agreed, Margaret said. But we need to be smart about this. It's stronger, faster, and now it's wary. It knows we can hurt it. Over the next 3 days, we developed a plan. Margaret had tracked the creature's movements and believed she had located its primary den, an abandoned storm drain that emptied into the harbor near the Hanover Street Bridge. The tunnel had been scheduled for renovation, but budget cuts had left it unused and largely forgotten. We gathered supplies, silver nitrate in pressurized sprayers, Margaret's custom ammunition loaded with silver fragments, powerful UV flashlights that she believed might disorient the creature, and basic protective gear. We would go in during daylight, when Margaret theorized the creature would be less active, though not dormant as in traditional werewolf lore. The morning of our planned operation, I received a text from an unknown number. "Stop looking, you're in danger." I showed it to Margaret when we met. "Could be anyone," she said, though her expression was troubled. "Someone from the forum who tracked your IP, a prank. Ignore it." The storm drain entrance was secured with a rusted grate that had been recently disturbed. We removed it carefully, the scrape of metal on concrete unnervingly loud in the quiet morning air. Beyond lay a large concrete tunnel, perhaps 8 feet in diameter, stretching into darkness. The faint sound of dripping water echoed from within. A musty animal smell wafted from the opening. Margaret went first, her modified rifle at the ready. I followed with a UV flashlight in one hand and a silver nitrate sprayer in the other. We moved slowly, our footsteps splashing in the shallow water that covered the tunnel floor. About 50 yards in, the main tunnel branched into smaller passages. Margaret pointed to claw marks on the concrete walls and dark stains that could have been blood. We followed these signs deeper into the drainage system. The air grew thicker, the smell stronger, a mixture of wet animal, decay, and something else, something chemical I couldn't identify. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber where several drainage pipes converged. The walls were marked with hundreds of claw gouges, as though the creature had used them as a scratching post. In the center of the chamber was a pile of debris, torn clothing, bones, remnants of the creature's victims. Margaret examined them grimly. "At least 5 different people," she whispered, pointing to distinctive items. "Maybe more." A low growl echoed through the chamber. We froze, weapons raised, turning slowly toward the sound. Nothing moved in the shadows. The growl came again, from a different direction. The acoustics of the chamber made it impossible to pinpoint the source. "It's toying with us," Margaret whispered. "It knows we're here." We stood back to back, scanning the darkness with our lights. Water dripped somewhere nearby, each splash amplified in the enclosed space. The attack came from above. The creature had been clinging to the ceiling, hidden in a recess. It dropped directly toward Margaret, claws extended. She fired her rifle upward, the report deafening in the enclosed space. The creature twisted midair, the shot grazing its shoulder. It landed heavily between us, immediately lashing out with sweeping claws that caught Margaret's arm, sending her rifle clattering across the wet floor. I sprayed the silver nitrate directly at the creature's face. It howled, recoiling momentarily, giving Margaret time to scramble away. But the effect seemed less dramatic than before. It had learned, was prepared for the pain. The creature charged at me, moving with that unnatural, jerky speed. I backpedaled, continuing to spray. But my heel caught on the uneven floor, and I fell backward, the sprayer flying from my hand. The creature loomed over me, its muzzle drawn back in a snarl that exposed rows of yellow teeth. Saliva dripped from its jaw as it tensed to strike. 2 shots rang out in rapid succession. The creature jerked as the rounds hit its back, then turned with a roar toward Margaret, who had retrieved her rifle. She fired again, the rounds striking the creature's chest. It staggered but didn't fall. I scrambled away as the creature charged toward Margaret. She fired repeatedly until the rifle clicked empty. The creature slowed, dark blood seeping from multiple wounds, but still advanced. Margaret drew a large hunting knife as the creature closed the distance. It swung massive claws at her, which she narrowly dodged, slashing at its arm with the knife. The blade left a smoking wound where it cut. Silver-edged, I realized. I searched frantically for a weapon, finding a length of rusted pipe among the debris. I grabbed it and rushed toward the creature from behind, swinging with all my strength at its head. The pipe connected with a sickening crack. The creature stumbled forward, momentarily stunned. Margaret saw her opportunity and lunged, driving her knife deep into the creature's chest. It let out a sound that was part howl, part scream, hauntingly human in its agony. Clawed hands grasped at the knife hilt, pulling the blade free in a spray of dark blood. It staggered backward, eyes wide with what seemed like shock or disbelief. For a moment, I thought we had succeeded. Then the creature's expression changed to one of pure rage. It lunged forward with renewed strength, catching Margaret before she could retreat. Massive jaws clamped around Margaret's shoulder. She screamed, a sound that echoed through the drainage chamber as the creature lifted her off the ground. Blood sprayed across the concrete walls as its teeth sank deeper. I charged forward, my mind blank with terror and rage. I slammed the pipe repeatedly against the creature's back and head, each impact eliciting a growl, but not releasing its grip on Margaret. Her screams had diminished to weak gasps, her face pale with shock and blood loss. In desperation, I grabbed the fallen silver nitrate sprayer and jammed the nozzle directly into one of the creature's bullet wounds, emptying the entire contents into its body. The effect was immediate and horrifying. The creature released Margaret, who collapsed to the ground and began to convulse violently. Steam rose from every orifice of its body, eyes, nose, mouth, and its many wounds. It clawed at itself, tearing chunks of its own flesh away, as though trying to remove the burning silver from its system. I dragged Margaret away, her blood leaving a dark trail across the concrete floor. The creature continued its agonized thrashing, slamming itself against the chamber walls with enough force to crack the concrete. Chunks of the ceiling began to fall as the structure destabilized. "We need to get out," I gasped, trying to lift Margaret. She was barely conscious, blood soaking the left side of her body, where the creature's teeth had torn through muscle and bone. "Finish it," she managed to whisper, pressing something cold and metal into my hand. A revolver, its chambers gleaming with what must have been silver bullets. The creature had fallen to its knees, still clawing at its own body, ripping fur and flesh away to reveal something underneath that made my stomach turn. Human skin, partially transformed, caught in some horrific middle state between man and beast. The drainage chamber was collapsing around us. I had seconds to decide: flee with Margaret or ensure the creature couldn't follow. The gun felt impossibly heavy in my hand. I raised the revolver, aiming at the creature's head. As if sensing my intention, it looked up, meeting my eyes. In that moment, something passed between us, a flash of recognition, of humanity trapped within the monster. A silent plea. I pulled the trigger. The silver bullet struck true, entering just above the creature's right eye. It jerked once, then collapsed forward into the shallow water. The transformation that began with the silver nitrate accelerated, fur sloughing off, limbs contorting, muzzle receding, until what lay before me was no longer a monster, but a man. Middle-aged, unremarkable, naked and covered in wounds, both self-inflicted and from our fight. I had no time to process what I'd witnessed. The chamber was coming down around us. I holstered the revolver, hoisted Margaret over my shoulder in a fireman's carry, and staggered toward the exit tunnel. Behind us, water was already flooding into the chamber, covering the body of what had once been the creature. The journey out was a blur of pain and fear. Margaret's blood soaked through my clothes. The tunnel seemed endless, branching in confusing directions. Several times I had to backtrack as passages had collapsed. By the time we reached daylight, Margaret's breathing had become shallow and irregular. I called 911 the moment we emerged, giving our location and pleading for an ambulance. I told them she'd been attacked by a wild animal while we were exploring the old drainage system, close enough to the truth that I could maintain the lie. The paramedics arrived quickly, taking over Margaret's care with efficient professionalism. They asked questions I couldn't fully answer. What kind of animal? How had we ended up in the drainage tunnel? I mumbled something about urban exploration and a large predator, possibly a bear. They exchanged skeptical glances but focused on keeping Margaret alive. As they loaded her into the ambulance, a police officer approached me. "Sir, we'll need a full statement about what happened here." I nodded numbly, knowing my story would never be believed. Behind him, other officers were already establishing a perimeter around the tunnel entrance, preparing to investigate. "The tunnel's collapsed," I said. "Flooded. You won't find anything down there." The officer frowned. "Let us determine that, sir." For 3 days, I waited at the hospital while Margaret underwent multiple surgeries to repair the damage to her shoulder and upper chest. The doctors were amazed she had survived such trauma. When she finally regained consciousness, her first words to me were, "Is it dead?" "Yes," I assured her. "It's over." She closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. "There will be others," she whispered. "What do you mean?" "It's not the only one," she said, her voice weak. "There are others. Different cities, watching, waiting." Before I could press her for more information, a nurse entered to check her vitals, and Margaret fell silent. When we were alone again, she seemed to have drifted back to sleep. The police investigation turned up nothing significant. As I'd predicted, the collapsed tunnel and subsequent flooding had erased most of the evidence. They found animal hair that they couldn't immediately identify, blood from multiple sources including the creature's unusual blood, and fragments of clothing from victims. But without a body, human or otherwise, their conclusions were tentative at best. Another case of urban wildlife, possibly a bear or large feral dog, using the drainage system as a den and attacking people. The case gradually faded from public attention as more pressing news took its place. My statement was filed away, another unexplained incident in a city full of them. Margaret recovered slowly but steadily. During her convalescence, she shared more of what she knew. Government experiments in the 1970s combining human and wolf DNA, test subjects who escaped, evidence hidden from the public. Much of it sounded like conspiracy theories, but after what I'd witnessed, I couldn't dismiss any possibility. 6 weeks after our encounter in the tunnel, I visited Margaret at her home in Virginia. She had converted her living room into a war room of sorts, walls covered with maps tracking similar incidents across the country. Red pins marked confirmed sightings or attacks. There were dozens. "They're organizing," she told me, pointing to clusters of pins in major cities. "Learning from each other. The one in Baltimore was just the beginning." "What do we do?" I asked. She handed me a folder containing contacts, other hunters like herself, people who had encountered the creatures and lived. Scientists researching the phenomenon in secret. "We fight," she said simply. "We find them, and we end them before they end us." That was 2 years ago. Since then, I've left my engineering career behind. Margaret and I have tracked 3 more creatures, one in Pittsburgh, one in Detroit, one outside Chicago. Each time we've learned more about their nature, their weaknesses, their origins. Each time we've barely survived. I write this account now as a record, a warning. If you're reading this, it means you've encountered something you can't explain, something that defies rational understanding. Perhaps you've seen claw marks where no animal should be able to reach, heard howls that sound almost human, found evidence of predation that doesn't match any known species. You're not crazy, you're not imagining things. But be careful, be very careful. They're watching, they're learning, and they know when they're being hunted. If you need help, there are those of us who understand. We're out there, tracking the shadows beneath bridges, within storm drains, and through abandoned buildings. Fighting a war most will never know exists. And if you hear scratching at your window in the night, remember, silver burns them. Fire slows them. But only severing the head or destroying the heart will truly kill them. I have to go now. Margaret has called with reports of unusual activity near the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. Another hunt begins. Remember, they look human until they don't. Trust your instincts, stay vigilant, and whatever you do, don't go alone into the shadows.